In June 2025, some of our leading spiritual teachers came together as part of a forum in Aspen, Colorado, to work out how to form a unitive consciousness with like-minded people. A consciousness that acknowledges that we're all together in this great endeavor that we call life. That deep down there's an awareness of our connectedness, and that this awareness is actually the beginning of the solution to many of the world's problems. To help us think and feel this through, we were joined by Marianne Williamson, Tim Shriver, Matthew Fox, Andrew Harvey, Cyprian Consiglio, Mindahi Bastadi, Susan Aposhian, Sherry Mitchell, and Heather Vesey. My name is Nicholas Vesey, and I'm the minister here at the Aspen Chapel who sponsored this event. This film is a distillation of the thoughts that came out of the forum, and we began by naming the problem that we're facing. Marianne Williamson.
Gandhi said the problem with the world is that humanity is not in its right mind. We were taught when we were children about how evolution works, and we were taught that if a species gets to the point where its collective behavioral patterns are no longer well adapted for the survival of that species, then one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to go extinct, or it is going to evolve. It's going to mutate. It's going to evolve. And I think Susan also said something that a lot of people have been thinking, which is not so sure. Not so sure we're going to make it. You know, I've thought for a long time, so many of us have had experiences, if not in our own lives and with people we've loved, around drugs and alcohol. It's become part of the cultural jargon that we understand that if somebody goes too far with an addiction to drugs, alcohol, that physical survival is not guaranteed. But we've always just assumed, well, humanity, somehow our survival would be guaranteed. And I think that people now are recognizing not necessarily.
Andrew Harvey carries on.
It is absolutely essential at this moment, at this terrible and amazing moment, that as many of us as possible realize two things. That we are now in what the Hindus call Kali Yuga. We're in the throes of the furnace burning of Kali Yuga, and we are now in an unprecedented global dark night. We're in climate collapse. We are on the brink of potential nuclear war. And in this country, in this glorious country of America, we are now sliding into the abyss of what could be the most dangerous form of fascism humanity has ever invented. What this means, too, is that seeing that, feeling that, registering that, not denying that, not turning away from that in passivity or denial or cultivating our little private gardens, we plunge into the greatest adventure that humanity has ever been given. The adventure of incarnating, embodying unitive consciousness and acting wisely, urgently, together, on every level and in every way, to save humanity and potentially save nature from the terrible destruction that we will wreak on it if we continue in our insane hubris and pursuit of domination and power.
And Cynthia Bourgeault.
What is going on now is a violation of conscience. It's a disfiguring of the face of the human being before God, if you can stand the God language. And to the extent that we are supposed to be made in the image and likeness of God in the Judeo-Christian tradition, it's a disfiguring of God.
Andrew Harvey again.
The most important thing that I could say to you about unitive consciousness is that it means not a hill of beans without conscience. You hear everywhere on every level people prattling on, babbling on about consciousness and talking about all the wonderful experiences they've had, and that's fine. But what does all of that mean if it isn't focused by a burning, heartbroken, but joyful conscience on a radical commitment to resist peacefully but forcefully all the orgy of evil that's now taking place nakedly in front of us.
So what can we do? Where can we start? Susan Potion.
Align yourself so that spirit can infuse whatever you do, so that some way, God knows how, we get through this. Our species survives the insanity it has created, environmentally, socially, politically. We've created insanity. We're adolescents as a species, right? We're adolescents, and each of us has to grow up a lot if we're going to pull this off. So I'm going to remind us continuously, pray and practice, pray and practice until maybe someday you can do it all day long, every day. And maybe if enough of us go toward that prayer, I'm going to cry. I want us, I don't care about me, but I want us as a species to survive and find a way to live harmoniously with the planet, with each other, with all the creatures. I want it very badly. When I was young, I believed we could do it. Now I have my doubts.
We feel that grief for what's happening, but we have to act. Mindahi Bastido.
Lots of efforts. But I'm telling you this story because it is a story of everywhere, just with different scenarios. Why is so important? Because it's possible to recover collective dignity as human species. It is possible to slow down, to stop and reverse all the damage that we have created because of greed, because of lack of comprehension of life systems, lack of comprehension of the relationship that we have with the stars and the cycles of time and space. And that's the very reason I'm telling you that until today, there is no international regime that protects biocultural heritage, biocultural memory, biocultural diversity. In our minds, in our ways of being, doing, acting, and feeling, we know that everything is interrelated. We cannot separate culture and biodiversity. We cannot separate what we have produced together with nature. And I'm talking about the most beautiful beings. In this case, the corn, the rice, the potatoes, and many other beings that are here with us. But this anthropocentric thought, even from the Western science or Western way of being, is killing us. We need to go back home. Because we need to, yes, of course, we can think from the anthropocentric thought, but we need to also to take into consideration of other species, because there is intelligence everywhere. There is intelligence everywhere you see is just lack of comprehension, lack of connection.
Susan again.
Sherry told us yesterday about her grandkids messing up their room. We have messed up our room, and we've messed it up for everybody. How are we going to clean this up, people? How are we going to come together and act in unison and harmony? We don't know. It's a mystery. We cannot conceive of it. When I was a young person, I thought we learned from Vietnam. I thought we learned from Watergate. I thought we were all learning together. We were going to do this right. I now see that that wasn't the case. None of the logical solutions, all my work at recycling and being respectful of our planet, it's a drop in the bucket. It's going to be a magical blessing that comes from whence we know not, from where we know not, that turns this thing around. All we can do is show up, learn about this body, this person you're inhabiting, you're temporarily impersonating. And be kind to the people around us. Be kind to the creatures around us. Be kind to the rocks and minerals around us. Be respectful and kind to ourselves and each other.
People have done this in the past. Etty Hillesum died in Auschwitz, yet she lived that unitive consciousness even there. Heather Vesey.
She embraced a radical simplicity and purity of heart. And as she did this, she lost all interest in protecting her one special life. But it was rather that it was in the Westerbork transit camp, where she worked for the Jewish Council. It's right there that she lived and moved amongst the thousands of people who were being put onto trains to concentration camps. It was there, in her words, surrounded in the camp by so many bundles of human misery, desperate and unable to face life. It was right there that she was able to access a deep down compassion, strength, and agency, even as she struggled with her own ill health and vulnerability. But it was right there in those horrendous circumstances that she lived into the full stature of her being. How did she do all this? Like, it sounds superhuman. She continued to be a mess. She was not well, and she didn't pretend otherwise. She was a glorious mix of vulnerability and strength, forever telling herself off and beating herself up. But she simply set her heart on love and was honest and accepting about her human experiences. In the end, when it was her turn to be put on a train to Auschwitz, we know that there was a song in her heart. A postcard was found that she had tossed out of the train, saying, "We left the camp singing."
So how do we get there? What do we have to do? Cynthia Bourgeault.
So the question is not if we act, but it's how we act. Act we must Leadership must be a part of the mix. The question that any of this can bring from the spiritual sector is a perspective on it, so that action doesn't simply become judgmental, reactive, and angry, so that it's suffused with skillful means, and in that sense reaches its target without ripping up the planet in the process. So I think that's the goal, and I think that's the goal that would be shared by almost all the people you'll be hearing and interacting with here. We want to do it. We know we have to do it. We know we have to gird up our loins. We don't know how to do it. Many of us are baby boomers. We've never known such insecurity before.
Andrew Scott.
The unitive consciousness idea, well, there's nobody that doesn't have a group, because we all exist inherently in community. I had a Buddhist teacher I was arguing with. I like to argue. Was raised in a dualistic society, as some of the previous speakers talked about. But this idea in Buddhism, and it also exists in Christianity, that we should, love and respect our parents. And, he kind of convinced me, that there is, no matter how bad parents might be, ultimately, without our parents, we don't exist. So to kind of cultivate this place of respect and love, there is no matter how isolated and alone a person is, they're always existing in community, not just as a member of a national group, but an entire global organism, and we're not separate.
Marianne Williamson.
Right now, I think the focus needs to be on the fact that the universe works like a giant GPS. You take a wrong turn, humanity has clearly taken a wrong turn, America has taken a wrong turn, and the GPS immediately calibrates your journey. And that's where I think we are. And I think each and every one of us has within us, we're like immune cells. Every cell in the body is coded with a natural intelligence. You go to the pancreas, you go to the stomach, you go to the brain. Every once in a while, a cell loses touch with its natural intelligence, loses touch with its collaborative function with other cells, goes off to do its own thing. It's only about me. That is what has happened to the human race. We have been infected with the malignant consciousness of total radical self-reference. It's all about me. But the body too recalibrates. That's what the immune system is. And right now, each and every one of us is being activated within. Susan was talking about we're crying. Yeah, I always say pray in the morning, kick ass in the afternoon. Yeah, we cry, but it's also time, especially for those of us, we must be leaders. You cry and then you get out there. And I think that's a really important issue right now. Keep the crying in a sacred space. Keep it in a sacred space with the people that you are close to, with your own therapist, your own closest friends and counselors. And then we got to go out there. And Gandhi was asked, who is the leader of the Indian independence movement? And his response was the small, still voice within. As soon as we sign up in our hearts, I'm available to you, God. I'm available. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? Each and every one of us, part of the equality, the divine equality of Homo Divinicus is each and every one of us has that small, still voice within, which is basic to both Christianity and Judaism. So the issue is whether we are doing this in order to save American democracy, which we certainly hope, or whether we're doing it to be part of the larger cultural thing. When Constantinople fell, because I don't think there's been any destructive phase this big since the fall of Constantinople. But you know what? When it fell, that seeded what would ultimately be the Italian Renaissance. So whether we're doing this to hopefully save this extraordinary dispensation of Western democracy, particularly America's part in it for those of us who are Americans, or whether it's just we're gathering the seeds and burying the jars so that those after us will be able to, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we sign up, I'm available. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom?
Susan Aposhen again.
We are primitive, earthbound, survival-oriented creatures that are also blessed with divinity. Our hearts open, we love deeply and passionately. We want to help each other. We want to make this world a better place. We want to live together in the complexity of this extraordinarily beautiful world. What planet has snow and trees and waves and oceans and octopuses, which is the correct plural of octopus, by the way, and scorpions? We don't know of any planet with this creativity and beauty and diversity. We learned yesterday that oneness is not sameness. And if we look at our planet, we see the complexity, the difference, that we can have bacteria and elephants, and they're both essential to this living planet. So how do we as individuals discover what kind of animal we are and what our place in this world is? There's only one way to do that, which is to go within. Some of us need to go out into action first, and then it bounces us back into ourselves, right? And some of us need to start from a very quiet, deep place. Some of us live in cities and need that intensity. Some of us need to be in the forest, in the quiet, in the ocean, in the quiet. So whatever your rhythm is, whatever kind of animal you are, something has turned you back inside, looking inward, or you wouldn't be here today, right? Something outside or inside says, come back, go deeper within yourself. So let's start with that right now.
Some advice as to how we should approach this from Sherry Mitchell.
For my part, I would like to offer a bit of guidance and some words of caution as we continue to bring this awareness into the mainstream consciousness. My first bit of advice is to enter upon this path humbly, taking great care not to align this movement with existing dogmatic frameworks that create false hierarchies or promote ideologies of superiority. Entering into a unitive consciousness does not make you better than anybody else. It does not make you smarter than anybody else. It does not make you morally superior to anyone else. Care must also be taken not to impose singular ideological language into the narrative that is being developed. One of the most divisive aspects of the colonial patriarchy has been its need for homogenization and the reduction of people, places, and beliefs into monothematic limitations. I think that it's important to recognize that colonization is not our goal. Colonization is a separation of the people from the land. It is a separation of our relationship from the very sources of life. What we need to do is to be rematriating our hearts with Mother Earth, re-embodying our sense of oneness with all life. And that is not something that happens through colonization. I think it would be a costly mistake for us to move toward unification of our consciousness with the assumption that oneness and sameness are equal. They are not. Any move towards sameness would unavoidably necessitate the establishment of confined parameters that would stifle the growth toward unity. Oneness has no need for sameness. It is built upon acceptance, inclusion, and appreciation for the value of difference. We have come to recognize that the living world thrives when our ecosystems and biodiversity are allowed to flourish intact. But we have yet to fully realize that the same is true for our societies. We too often cling to our attachment of the idea that our way is the right way. If people just saw things the way that we did, everything would be okay. My people, Banawabskewi and Beskadamakadi, are people of the circle. We value the gift of multiple perspectives and recognize that we are stronger when we think and feel together, through conflict and toward consensus, which is not agreement, but acceptable alignment with some shared truth. We know that when diverse viewpoints are valued and shared, the entire community becomes wiser, more tolerant, and adaptable. This fluidity keeps the society supple and reduces instances of break and rupture. Sameness is fragile and susceptible to exclusion. Oneness flows without rigid structure or dividing lines. Within oneness, there is space for a multiplicity of ideologies that can cohere around common goals. I think it's likely true that many of us have believed that those common goals would rise out of a shared morality. But rather than coming closer together in this area, we appear to be moving further apart. This division is something that I, and I imagine many of you, have been giving a great deal of thought in recent years. I have some theories about this that I hope that we can consider together. The theory on moral foundations, which was developed by Jonathan Haidt and Jesse Graham, states that emotion is the primary catalyst for morality. More specifically, they identify the feeling of disgust. Psychological philosopher Mark Matusik, in his book Ethical Wisdom, references this theory when he states that it is emotions, not reason, that form the bedrock of ethical life. Without them, the most rational human being cannot be empathic or morally sound. Though I agree that emotions are essential to morality, I don't agree that disgust continues to play the same role in catalyzing moral behavior as it once did, at least not a shared or staid morality. If we are to adhere to the theory that disgust is the primary catalyzing emotion for a shared morality, then we must have some agreement on the baseline behaviors that we find repulsive. A quick look at the current reality informs us that there are vast differences in what people find reprehensible. For instance, some find cruelty to be immoral, while others appear to be delighting in it. We have a shifting moral baseline where the things that once disgusted most members of the society today barely raise an eyebrow. In addition to a shifting moral baseline, we also have a shifting moral anchor. We have shifted from disgust to contempt. Though closely positioned on the emotional scale, there are vast differences between disgust and contempt. Disgust is an aversion to an object, something that offends our senses. It can be something physically offensive or even an idea, action, or behavior. Disgust makes us feel bad. It's cringy and creates a desire within us for change. It moves us to actively remove or to change what we find disgusting. Maybe it's a dirty diaper, or perhaps it's the reality of people living in abject poverty or being treated with malice for reasons they cannot control, such as race. Contempt, on the other hand, is a feeling of dislike toward another person, combined with a feeling of moral superiority. Unlike disgust, contempt doesn't always make us feel bad. You know that that's just true, right? In fact, in many instances, the sense of moral superiority that it creates provides us with a righteous sense of empowerment and a stubborn unwillingness to change. Contempt is also a driver of anger, which can be equally motivating, but often results in harmful rather than corrective behavior. This shift toward contempt is seductive. It allows us to remain convinced that we are good and that others are bad. It insulates us from any sense of responsibility to engage or correct. It frees us from the accountability that we carry as co-creators of this reality. The shift from disgust to contempt also prevents us from contemplating the complexity that exists in this pathway toward unity and from acknowledging that it requires something of us, something tangible and active. It requires healing, realignment, and conscious co-creation.
And Tim Shriver takes up this theme of contempt.
We have a new issue in our country, in my view, and in many countries, I'm sorry to say. We have come to conclude that the best way to drive out hatred is by using hatred and contempt. Arthur Brooks calls it a cultural addiction. We have a contempt problem. We no longer shy away from or shun or are fearful or embarrassed by the use of contempt. We lionize it, we praise it, we follow it, we're riveted by it. I mean, this past week, we had a beautiful ongoing drama of contemptuous dehumanization from two of the world's most powerful leaders. And people cheered their own side or the other side, who was getting the better of it. So I want to invite us to recognize that in this moment, I call this a new issue. That if we're going to think about the power of a unitive consciousness or non-dual consciousness, we have to think about it in the context of a culture, a superstructure that is rewarding its opposite. And contempt is not simply names or words. The Gottmans have pointed out, and maybe some of you can resonate with this, in interpersonal relationships, not just in culture, we quickly opt for contempt a lot of the time. It damages our marriages, our friendships, our relationships with our children, our friends, our fellow employees. When contempt begins to overwhelm your relationship, you forget all the positives. You become in an us versus them world. It's poison. So we're living in a superstructure that normalizes a toxic poison.
Matthew Fox.
The question is, how we create a unitive consciousness in the circumstances, given the signs of our time. And of course, the demise and threats toward democracy are part of the signs of our times. I like to turn to the mystics myself because they're champions of unity. Julian Norwich in the 14th century, first woman to write a book in English, uses the word wanting, O-N-E-I-N-G, wanting, for our experience of the divine, that we become one with the divine and the divine with us. She says, between humans and the divine, there is no between, which is a catchy bumper sticker. And of course, John of the Cross, 16th century reformer and mystic, talks about the union with the beloved, the union with the beloved. His favorite name for the divine is the beloved. And that very much echoes part of his ancestry, which is Moorish and Muslim, therefore. And many of the Muslim saints and mystics like Rumi also talk about God as the beloved. And then in our own time, we have Martin Luther King Jr. talking about the beloved community. And I think that is very much the question at hand here. How do we create a community that is really community, that loves, and where the community itself becomes a beloved project? The word community, after all, comes from two Latin words, communio, to work together, to share a common task together. That certainly is what democracy is supposed to be about. And it certainly is what saving the planet is about. I mean, what was it, 50, 60 years ago, we were all thrilled when first human being landed on the moon, happened to be an American, and where we received not only from cosmonauts and astronauts, both the American explorers and the Russian explorers, pictures of the Earth as a single entity. And that, of course, has permeated our consciousness insofar as you've all seen pictures like this. And that was an image of the unity that we share. This planet is one planet. It's all interdependent. And we're not living that out yet any more than we're living out a full democracy. American democracy, of course, started out with a good line, all men are created equal, but in fact it was excluding Black men, and women were not in that sentence at all. So it took a civil war to solve the first problem, that of slavery, and it took 80 years of protest to give women the vote in 1920. So it's one thing to have these ideals, it's another thing to fill them out. And then, of course, there was the Great Depression, and it seemed like capitalism was sinking entirely. But FDR rose and came up with imagination, political imagination. So there's nothing to fear but fear itself, and set out opportunities for the unemployed, of which there were so many millions at that time. And since then, we've developed Medicaid and Medicare. We've had to have a huge civil rights movement, but many lost their lives and millions went to jail, including teenagers, to fight for their rights. All this is about unity consciousness. It is about living up to our so-called ideals. Now we're living at a time where all these accomplishments are in jeopardy. Instead of there being an urge to develop fuller unity at this moment, there's an urge to divest us of these accomplishments. I think the number one reason behind this destructive movement was the decision of the Supreme Court to allow untold amounts of dark money into our politics, so that we literally have the situation now where we are facing a government not of the people, by the people, and for the people that Abraham Lincoln promised near the end of the Civil War, but a government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires, which truly would be the end of democracy as we know it in this country. So we cannot talk about unity without talking about its opposite. That would be like talking about peace without talking about justice. It's just sentimental fluff. We have to be realistic. So what do the mystics say about all this? What do they say about this struggle? Well, first of all, there is an inner struggle. There's an inner work that has to happen. Meister Eckhart says we sink eternally from letting go to letting go into the one. That's powerful language, and it's very insightful. We sink eternally from letting go to letting go into the one. So learning to let go, all of us have to participate in that letting go. The letting go of slavery, the letting go of racism that was so much a part of slavery, the letting go of laws that serve the few and not the many. But all of us undergo these experiences of letting go. And we realize that we sink into the one, that the unity is already here, because we're already human beings, all of us. and this is not just an American situation, but it is literally our species situation. Currently, our species, we've already counted about 15 other hominids who were our cousins, Neanderthal and Denison and others. Well, they're all extinct. We're the last ones standing. So clearly, you would think there'd be kind of a sense of emergency and a keen concern whether our species can even continue, given the extinction spasm going on with hundreds of millions of other species because of climate change. And we are facing the same reality. So you would think that part of unity is agreeing on common disaster that's facing us. And let's talk about religions. Religions all have around the world. I don't know one religion that doesn't talk about curbing greed. Curbing greed. Because we are interdependent, because of some groups or some individuals think they're just here to gobble up all the resources, whether they're from Mother Earth directly or whether they're from Wall Street or wherever they are. If that's what your mentality is, that will destroy any community. There's no loved, beloved community where greed reigns. We all have to check some of our appetites at the door if we're going to be truly involved in the communal, in making a common task together, making democracy happen or making survival happen. So if you let the facts in, if you're living in the real world, and not just in a world of entertainment or games or gadgets, you're living in the real world, this should be enough to wake all of us up in every country in the world to look for answers, to look for the beloved community and what we're doing to save one another. Can we agree? Is this unity to agree that Earth is a healthy Earth is a good thing? Can we agree on that? That healthy forests is a good thing? Healthy soil? Healthy oceans and rivers and lakes and waters? And pure drinking water, for example? Can we agree on that? Can we agree that assisting the old and assisting the youngest ones, the children, assisting children, the youngest ages, to get started on learning in good schools available to all, that this is a good thing? Can we agree that science is a good thing? Science can warn us about the tremendous dangers we're facing. On the one hand, it can also assist us in creating the technology to solve a lot of our problems, because our problems are solvable. We're that smart. But we're not wise. Wisdom includes the heart. Wisdom includes caring. Wisdom includes play and creativity and joy. Wisdom is feminine. So survival includes bringing in the feminine in all its dimensions to balance the masculine. And it also includes critiquing the masculine. So it's not about carrying on reptilian brain exercises of war and more war, and I win and you lose, my team wins and you lose. We can play at those things. That's what sports is for. So we play it with the reptilian brain. Brilliant idea that humans come up with, to have sports, to play with reptilian brain. But to turn over our citizenship, our money, to war, to the reptilian brain, to war against Mother Earth, just rape, take everything we can and leave nothing behind for future generations. That's as unwise as you can get. That's pure folly. Folly is the opposite of wisdom. There's plenty of that going around.
Susan Aposhian.
We don't know how we're going to get from here to a unitive consciousness that can save the planet. save our species and save the other species that we are in the process of eliminating. We don't know. Right now, go into your heart. Breathe into your heart and embrace that feeling of nameless, wordless sentiment in your heart.
And so we come to practical advice. First, Tim Shriver.
And I'm going to offer just a few short texts here. Is there a skillful means for this specific problem, for how love transforms hate? Just one problem. It's a big one, though, because latent within this question is how we approach the idea of solving every problem. Is there a skillful means by which we can treat with dignity those from whom we are divided? Still hold them accountable, still work for justice, but treat people with dignity nonetheless. So I'm going to give you 3 quick examples of how our traditions and our teachers show us, I think, a path to the deployment of a unitive consciousness in real time. Here's the cloud of unknowing describing some 800 years ago or so, the practice of, I would almost call it, of giving up control. And this is a common text, many of us have studied it. Lift up your heart to the Lord with a gentleness, with a quality, a stirring of love, not for any outcome, not for gifts, but just for his own sake. And then this beautiful section in the bottom, feel nothing except a naked intent toward God. A naked, like a literally denuding of all of your intent. So the first gift I would suggest that unitive consciousness can bring to us is the capacity to draw us into our naked intent to love. This is the practice of centering prayer, meditation, contemplation in many different traditions, but I think it's essential to solving the problem of what we do in moments of conflict. A second quality, here's again Father Rohr, speaking on the practice of what faith can do for us in these moments. The unitive way, he writes, is utterly mysterious and still rather scary and threatening. Why is it scary and threatening? No control. We have to trust mystery. We have to have ambiguity. That man describing that scene in his community didn't know what was going to happen. He had no assurance. Pulling a gun or a weapon might have been a much safer path. But he drew within and he decided a blessing. He had to trust that the ambiguity, the suffering, the mystery of the moment could do what Father Richard says here at the end. This is the only way. Faith is the process of getting to love, but the willingness and hope, the willingness to live without resolution. Having faith doesn't have to do with being perfect. It has to do with staying in relationship. Our practice, our shifting of consciousness, I suggest, when healed with or purged by faith, by an ambiguity, by a tolerance for suffering, makes it possible for us to learn to see with new eyes. And finally, let me just mention a little bit about forgiveness. James Allison has written The Resurrection, the story that so many of us have in our at least religious past, if not our religious presence, is the story of the resurrection. James Allison says this is the story, is forgiveness. But Felicia Morell takes us a little bit further into this. In liminal space, she writes, the space of sitting with our truths, the space of mystery, hear the same language, the unknown, where we get to let go of our injured expectations. What? To be seen, to be known, to be welcomed, to be approved, to be validated, to be vindicated, to shown that we were right, they were wrong. That hunger each of us has. We acknowledge the feelings and the power and the depth of all of those feelings. Let them through, let them roll through us. But instead of projecting outward, she writes, we sit and we release. And on the threshold between what was and what will be, the past and the future, we release. And in that space of release, that unburdening, she writes in this last paragraph, I discover a formlessness that blurs the intersection of diversity and unity, and I hear till all are one, not just as a cry, but as a realization. Simple gifts, a naked intent, a tolerance for ambiguity, a willingness to see in the present that we are all already one. These are pieces of what I would call a unitive consciousness. Very important as skills to be deployed so that we can learn a way of knowing that is not, as Cynthia, and I'm so honored to be even on a panel that includes in any way Cynthia Bourgeault, one of the most important teachers of my life, a way of knowing not accessible to the mind. She asks us over and over again, can we rewire, reprogram the organ of perception, not to see with our eyes, our physical eyes, our brains, our splitting brain. He's right, she's wrong. She's right, he's wrong. But to achieve a stabilized, non-dual perception that would enable us to oppose hatred without becoming what we oppose.
And Cynthia Bourgeault.
The first is centering prayer, or any form of strong, good meditation that will allow a person to detach from their emotions, feelings, provisional reactivity. It can be centering prayer, that's mine in honor of Thomas Keating, my teacher, any other form, Vipassana meditation, whatever. And it needs to be a bedrock, because personal reactivity is, as the ancient traditions have, it blurs awareness. We get all up at emotional reactivity, agendas, ego issues, judgment, blame, and then we cannot act with the kind of clear impartiality that's forceful. So that is the bedrock. The second piece comes from G.I. Gurdjieff, which is three-centered awareness, which is the realization that we have within us three discrete, CRETE, three separate systems of intelligence, all operating at their own speed and giving their own perspective on the world. And these are the intellectual center, our thinking brain, our emotional or feeling brain, but also our moving center, which is intelligence and movement, the ability to explore the world through sensation and movement, particularly rhythmic. So the third after that is a quality I've been speaking about quite a lot lately, which is called metis. The word comes from the Greek, and it was first called to our attention by Peter Kingsley, who actually gave us a seminar here in Aspen many years ago. Wonderful British philosopher. And Peter pointed out that this Greek word actually means shrewdness. But what it means is skillful timing. It knows how to act in a way with exactly the right force and exactly the right timing so that it strikes its goal. It's like, how do you deliver the karate chop? The fourth is conscience, which is learning how to act and to see beyond the subtle, beyond our kind of templates of right and wrong, seeing beyond judgment, seeing beyond what we think is right and wrong, seeing with humility, but acting absolutely in straight alignment with our conscience, which is our connection. It's the eye of the heart, as far as I'm concerned. It is the rod in us that aligns with imaginal causality and even beyond. It's a kind of deep sense of unity with and in the infinite. And I think the restoration of conscience is one of the crying needs of our own skill building set. The fifth is courage, which is in the old French, courage, the way of the heart. Again, courage is to follow the path of conscience without fear. It's not bravado, it's not in your face, it's not reckless. Sometimes you're scared shitless, but you will not fall out of alignment. It's that kind of courage. It's that which provides the interior composure to walk forward gracefully, resolutely, even in fear. And finally, compassion, which is deeper than pity and deeper than love. Compassion is ground on equality. And equality is ground on seeing that we're all one. I'm not looking down on somebody or imposing. Compassion is that we could easily be in either person's shoes. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for our planet, compassion for those we consider to be our enemies, compassion for all of us stuck in this horrible loop that was nobody's making. It's come by forces and by needs and by years and years and decades and maybe even centuries of misattention and misdirection. A course correction that may be required from points beyond ourselves. But compassion is what will allow us to go through it, keeping our hearts open and soft to one another, to our planets. And only with that softness of heart can anything that I've said in the last 25 minutes or so find a place to land. So in the spirit of compassion, courage, conscience, metis, three-centered awareness, and meditative prayer, I send you all forth with a blessing and deep gratitude. Thank you.
Andrew Harvey.
What you discover about unitive consciousness now and what we need are three things. And these three things are absolutely essential for us all to get one with as soon as we can, because what's needed now quite clearly is a worldwide revolution, peaceful but fervent and focused, of love in action. And every single teacher and every single seeker on every single path needs now, I believe, to align themselves with the great stream of evolutionary mysticism and the three essential teachings for our time it contains. The first essential teaching is that we cannot afford any more to divorce our hunger for consciousness from the duties and responsibilities of divine awakened conscience. Because if we do, we will continue to be spectacular narcissists bathing in our own private experiences and not realizing that those experiences are given us by the One to make us brave, wild, heroic, funny, joyful, and absolutely committed to the birth of a new world out of the ashes of the old. We will, in other words, just be playing with light at a moment when the whole of human life and the whole of nature is threatened. And when you cross over, I was told by the Christ in the vision of the resurrected Christ I had in Coimbatore in my 40s, when you cross over from a time like this, you're only going to be asked one question, not how much money you had, not how much good you did, but what the hell did you do when the world was burning? That's the first challenge of evolutionary mysticism. The second challenge will be more difficult for many of us, although it hasn't been very difficult for me. And it is to get aligned with what is called in the mystical traditions divine ferocity. The divine isn't only tender. Divine love is both tender, protective, nourishing, adoring, and also at times when necessary, unbelievably fierce. And it is this ferocity of truth, this ferocity of the willingness to stand up to the lies that are now dominating our whole world that will distinguish the authentic from the fake. If you look at one example in Jesus's life, you'll see exactly what I mean by divine ferocity. And this is the moment when Jesus overturns with divine anger the people, the tables that are loaded with things that people are selling in the temple. And if you really contemplate that situation, it actually has two extraordinary components. The first is that Jesus is the living flame of incarnate divine love, saying this buying and selling in the temple, this disgusting and obscene materialism when it comes to God is an abomination. And he is doing that terrible and amazing act to say this has to stop. But the other thing you realize if you go deeper is that Jesus isn't saying that or doing that to damn the people who are doing what they're doing. He's doing that as an act of divine ferocity to show them in the mirror the danger of what they are doing to their souls and to the world. He's offering the very people who he is scolding with his critique a chance to redeem themselves. We must denounce what is happening in our country, the insane laziness over the climate, the insanity of allowing the world to be brought to the brink of nuclear war. And we must denounce the actions of all the people who have given themselves over to the dark and are doing this. But we must never, ever hate them. They are children of God and they deserve our love and our forgiveness. But that does not mean, as soppy idiots in the New Age have said again and again, that we should do nothing. No, we should resist as Martin Luther King resisted, as Gandhi resisted, as Churchill resisted, but without hatred, because they too are children of God and they are playing unconsciously a great role in the potential divinization of humanity and of ourselves. The last great challenge that evolutionary mysticism and its real potent description of unitive consciousness provides us is that, look, it doesn't mean a hill of beans at this moment if you've had marvelous visions of interdependence and if you've seen the whole world explode in light and if you've been initiated by the Archangel Michael or Mary Magdalene or Jesus himself. If you don't put the powers and ravishing intuitions and deep new energies that are given you into sacred action, because millions of people all over the world know now that love is a verb. Unitive consciousness is a verb activated by conscience. So, my dear friends, let us be extremely clear, focused, brave, and come together, all teachers, all lovers of God, face what we're facing, face that we must embrace this far richer, deeper, more challenging vision of unitive consciousness, and go ahead, enjoy, knowing that if we do, we will become the warrior midwives of a new reality, a new humanity, a new world. We can't just think about this. We have to do it now.
And we do all this not for ourselves, but for our future. Sam Veazey.
I'm sitting here kind of as a representative of the future in a certain way. the one here that will be like carrying on this sort of mentality going forward, as I'm assuming the youngest person in the room. But amongst my peers and amongst like the youth, and especially transgender youth, I think unitive consciousness is only going to become more and more important. The more I talk to people, the more I think about how we are realizing we're all in this together. Politics in this country has really been, for my entire life, a decline of responsibility, a decline of adults acting like adults. And it's really worrying as a child growing up into a young adult now to see people who are supposedly running the country, supposedly leading us, acting less mature than I would. And that's terrifying. Especially as a transgender person, I have to trust to a certain extent that the government is going to continue to support my existence. People think that trans people have just come into existence, but we have been there the whole time. Throughout history, transgender men and transgender women, and those who sit outside the gender binary, have been a part of society, living amongst everyone else in ways where often someone couldn't tell, sometimes they could. We have capacities to medically transition now, which we didn't have before, which I'm very grateful for, but that doesn't mean we're in the clear. There is every capacity for people in power to wake up tomorrow and say that I don't deserve to exist. And so unitive consciousness is a genuine form of praxis for me. Because if I have a unitive consciousness with all of you, and you do with me, then I can have a degree of assurance that I am safe, which is not there if we're all individuals and we're all acting on our own. And so looking forward into the future, I hope and I pray and I am working as hard as I can to assure that we being everyone here, as well as everyone in my generation, work as hard as we can to foster that sense of unitive consciousness and unity amongst all people, to recognize that the people are the ones really in charge, and the ones really in charge are just the ones that are standing around giving orders.
Thank you so much for watching. If this resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others. You can join us and our mailing list at aspenwisdom.org. Or if you'd like to contact me personally, my email is nicholas@aspenwisdom.org. If you'd like to see the full forum, it's in 2 parts, each around 2 hours, on the Aspen Chapel YouTube channel and on the Aspen Wisdom website. I'm going to leave you with a song from Cyprian Consiglio, which was a part of the forum.
Back in February of 2003, there was a reading of poetry at the gates of the White House led by the poet Sam Hamill, as well as over 160 other public readings in various countries in almost all the 50 states. This was in opposition to the Bush administration's plunge into war in Iraq, which finally did occur actually in March 19th of 2003. During that time, 9,000 poets submitted poems and statements to a website called Poets Against the War. And then a book was published that includes the best of those poems submitted to the website, including such well-known names as Adrienne Rich, W.S. Merwin, Robert Bly, Jane Hirschfield. And there was one poem in that book that for some reason just stuck out at me. It's called We Are Waiting for Peace to Break Out by Carlos Reyes. I carried it around for years and years before I finally did something with it. And this is what came out of it. We are waiting for peace to break out.
are waiting for peace to break out. We are waiting for flowers to bloom. We are waiting for the moon to come from behind the black clouds of war. We are waiting for light. We are waiting. And as we wait, we hold out our hands in love and friendship. White hands extended in friendship to black hands and brown and green hands of the earth. We are waiting. And while we wait, we applaud all those who have gone before us preaching peace. All the Mahatma Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings, the Dorothy Days, the Daniel Bergens. We are waiting for peace to break out. We are waiting for flowers to bloom. We are waiting for the moon to come from behind the black clouds of war. We are waiting for light. We are waiting. And as we wait, we dance. We dance with the cold east wind, with the creaking, singing branches of giant firs. We dance with the devils of dust and the angels of clouds. We are waiting. And as we wait, we are learning the language of burning roses and the sunflowers slowly turning toward the sun. We are waiting for peace to break out. We are waiting for flowers to bloom. We are waiting for the moon to come from behind the black clouds of war. We are waiting for light. We are waiting. And as we wait, we are learning to listen to cries for mercy and cries for help, though we may not know the language. We are learning to listen for the arrival of doves. We are waiting. And while we wait, we are smiling at you, at all of you, at the you and the me in the mirror. We are waiting for peace to break out. We are waiting for buds to pop, though it's deep winter. We are waiting for flowers to bloom. We wait for peace as patiently as the drop of water, the lips of the mouth of the fountain. We are waiting for the moon to come from behind the black clouds of war. We wait knowing the water of peace is cool and sweet, sure that the crystal drop will follow the earth in spite of our actions, waiting for light. We are waiting. And as we wait,